Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So thank you very much for coming to Startup Grind. I want to welcome Leila. Thank you very much. And we're going to start with some standard questions. You've been in Startup Grind before?
I have one.
One? Dogs.
Ducks.
That was a fun one. So we start with a couple of standard questions. What did your parents do?
Okay, going right back. Yes. My dad was a window cleaner, and my mum was a home economist who ran a boarding house.
Boarding house?
Yeah.
So what's the boarding house like, as in for students?
No, a boarding house for people, just guys, women working in Canada, in Toronto. So I went to Toronto when I was a baby.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Where did you grow up?
Yes, I grew up in Toronto until I was 6,
Yep.
and then my mum and the 3 girls came back to Scotland, and so then I lived in Scotland until I was 16.
Okay. Did you do any type of jobs in Scotland?
Oh yeah. I was a lifeguard.
A lifeguard? Did you have beaches there?
At the local swimming pool, which was an outdoor swimming pool, and it was freezing cold all year long. Yeah.
So not many people swam?
Oh
Or
yeah,
it's just
no, lots of people swam, but we swam at
like
school.
your summer is just what you get used to, the temperatures of just like a degree or more hotter.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when you moved to Australia, you came to Adelaide, or you lived somewhere else first?
Sydney.
Sydney?
Oh, I lived lots of places, so we don't, all over the place. Tasmania, Western Australia.
What was the travel for?
Because I like travel, so I travelled overland from London to Australia. So I went through the Middle East.
So you came here by yourself, or you came here with your
No, I
parents?
came here by myself.
Okay. And then you got into, I guess the next question is, what was your first entrepreneurial type of business like that you did, illegal or legal?
My first
No one ever gives me the legal answer.
I started a magazine in Sydney.
Yeah.
So I've been working on magazines for a few years, and then I had children, and I went freelance. Well, I've always done freelance, so we have always had my own business because I've never just had one job.
Yep.
So I founded a magazine called Women at Work, which, on reflection, could have been better named, but we decided not to call it Working Women. But anyway.
Was that a King's Cross?
Close.
Okay, so how old were you when you started that?
Oh shit. I was old enough. I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Yes.
You were an editor for Women's Day?
Women's Weekly.
Women's
Yes.
Weekly. Okay.
And many others.
Was that before your magazine? So
Yes.
that helped you to launch your own magazine?
Oh, my whole background is journalism. So yeah, I've been a journalist since I was 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what got you into journalism?
Some guy, you know.
Something.
I was dating a guy who was a journalist and said, "Oh, you could be a journalist."
Was that what? Like, did you have a passion? Was it something before?
No.
You were
Nobody had ever told me. Nobody had ever told me that I could be a journalist. Certainly not my parents. And my father. I was on my way to university, and my father said, "What's the point of you going to university? You'll be married by the time you're 21," because that was the era. And yeah.
Were you married by the time you were 21?
No.
So you proved me wrong.
I certainly did. Yeah.
Did you go to uni?
No.
No? Do you regret that?
Oh yes, no. I think that the amount of experience I had by the time I was 23 was greater than
What you would have got at uni?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been working for a bunch of different people, and you really are like a freelancer in terms of you don't just have the one job ever. Right now you still don't just have the one job there.
I don't have the one business. I've got several businesses.
What are those businesses?
Well, the main one is Newsmaker, which is the press release distribution platform. It's media marketing and social media distribution, and that's really my core business and has been for quite a long time now.
Does that work well for? Do you have to really be hands-on in that business? It's
very, very automated now, so to the extent where I can do numerous other things and it doesn't affect the business.
Okay.
The revenue comes in.
every month you get your payday.
Well, not every month, but every day. Every hour, right now. Yeah, ka-ching. Yeah, so it's an automated platform.
Do else you got at the moment?
So at the moment, I've started with two new arms, I guess, of the business. One is that I've gone into partnership with the new media monitoring company in Melbourne that's going to we're integrating Newsmaker with it. So we'll be the press release distribution for that, and we'll be in competition. That puts us in competition with some of the biggest companies in Australia in this field. And it's a good move.
What's the other one?
The other one is more in the line of software development. So I can't say a huge amount about it because we're just in the process of filing the patents, but it's in the area of rapid application development.
Okay.
And then we're also developing a platform that will allow you to use a text message. I'll be able to text message a journalist's name to the system, and it will send me back all the juice on that journalist, what they're writing about, what they're blogging about, what they're tweeting about, who was, etc., etc., etc.
So what's the target market for that?
The same market as Newsmaker, PR marketing.
Okay, so if I have my own company and I want to be able to get an article written about me, I can text to find out how I get to that person. Is that sort of?
Yes, that's right. That's right. I mean, anybody could use that system. PR people are always better at dealing with journalists because they understand their little ways. But anybody could use the system.
Yeah. So, how did you find that moving to Australia, getting into work? Did you have any issues with that?
I literally flew in from India to WA and hitchhiked across the Melbourne. On my own, by the way. And long story short, I landed in Sydney with a letter to visit a house in Walker Street in Sydney. And the next day, I went down to Fairfax magazines and said, I've just arrived, this is my background. I had quite a good experience already at that stage. And they just immediately gave me a job, so it was pretty easy. And then about 3 weeks later, Ida Buttrose from the Australian Women's Week, they called me and said, I'd like to come up, heard about it, I'd like you to come up and see me, and she gave me a job. So
that worked out alright.
It worked out okay.
So what made you leave, I guess, Sydney or leave Fairfax?
Some guy, no.
You got some trouble with these guys.
Well, by that time I'd had a couple of kids and got divorced. And I'm always ready to try something new, and I got the job of a journalist on the Australian newspaper on the IT section, and that is actually how I come to be in the startup community in Adelaide. Because working on the Australian newspaper, you just have constant opportunities to meet people, and I just met all these cool people that I had no idea about. It's like like Emily there coming into the IT industry and realising, what community it is, how big it is, how exciting it is. Yes.
So, were you excited about tech before?
I'd always been involved in technology, so I had a big interest in it because I was the first person to have a computer at ACP, Australian Consolidated Press, where the weekly was. So I was a trainer at ACP for other people using those.
So you were learning while you were training people?
Yeah, that's right. So I was training people to turn bold italics and things like that.
Was that before shortcuts?
It was.
So how did you have to do it back then? Because I don't remember those days.
I can just remember.
I grew up with shortcuts.
Yeah.
Just like some sort of.
Yeah.
So for an Australian, you were still in Sydney, or you were?
No, that was in Adelaide. Yeah, so I'd come to Adelaide, but prior to that, I worked in PR. So I went from working on magazines, when I had children, I immediately started to get work in PR. People just asked me to write. So I actually started working for, my main client was IBM, so IBM Australia, and I got to work across every division of IBM. So I got to work across PCs, and I used to write the RS6000 magazine. I don't know what that is. Massive servers, massive computers, the old style.
Made type of things.
Yeah. AS400, so I wrote the magazines. And
how many pages were the magazines?
About 40 pages. Yeah.
They just released them once, or?
Each month.
40 pages.
Mm.
So you really got into the tech stuff then?
I really got into it, yeah. I learned it completely from the ground up. I had no idea what I was writing about. People were just copying me, and I would just, I just write it into English, and everyone seemed to be happy, so... Yeah.
So after the Australian, because you work for in business now?
That's just a temporary, that's just to help somebody out.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm much more involved on the building a technology business side. So with Newsmaker, what happened was that I was working in PR agencies sending out press releases, and there were no online systems. And at the same time, I was working for a company called Four Stakes, which had its main investor was Alan Noble.
Yep.
Google. So I had the pleasure of working with him for 2 years at Four Stakes. And at that time, we went to Anzatech. Do you remember Anzatech? Do you know what that is? It's the Australia, New Zealand, America technology network. We used to have massive networking events with pitching contests.
Those are the ones that take people to America. They talk Jindu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they used to have big events. It was fantastic. It was sort of like South Start, but in Silicon Valley, and a lot bigger. It was so excellent environment. And myself and David Griggs used to train the companies that pitched there. So we'd train 10 or 20 companies to go to Anzatech, and then we get to go as well. And I was talking to a guy at the bar, a developer from Tasmania, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a fully automated press release distribution service. There was nothing like it. There was nothing being Google News indexed. There was no way to search for a press release online or to find them through search. So he said, I can do that.
So how were press releases getting done before that?
They were being sent out, still often are sent out by fax.
Yep.
And sent out, now they're sent out PDF and sent out. That was the way we used to do it. When I started Newsmaker, that's how we used to do it.
Before we had the automatic system.
Before we had the fully automatic system,
So I'll ask a bit more about that. What sort of issues did you find with building Newsmaker? Because have you ever coded before?
No, I didn't have to code anything. My job was to manage the database and the marketing and to basically develop the whole business.
Yep.
And then just work with the coder. So that was my first experience of working with developers.
How did you find that?
It's always frustrating, but I had a bloody good developer, and if I could go back in time, I would stick with that developer. But he went back to uni. He was a PHP coder, it was all raw code.
Yeah, we didn't have frameworks back then.
Yeah, that's right. There's no frameworks, so that's right.
So why did you go back to uni then?
All those things happened. Over business, just over in Tasmania. He was in Tasmania.
So what did you end up outsourcing?
Then I made my first classic mistake, which was a local company that had seen Newsmaker as it was and said, oh, we can do a much better job than that, very cheaply. And I said, how cheaply? And they gave me a very low figure. And I said, okay. And at the top of the spec that I gave them, I said, this is the property of News Gallery, which is my company. And 6 months later, they said they would deliver in 3 months. 6 months later, 8 months later, 9 months later, I still didn't have the system. And then the CEO, who had not been working on this project at all, came back from overseas and said, well, that would be our IP and we'll license it to you. So he basically, this is all being recorded, isn't it? But anyway. It was a long time ago, and that company is now gone broke. So what I did then was I had to redevelop. I decided, okay, have it your own way. Rather than spend money on lawyers, I decided to redevelop the system. Then I made my second mistake.
That's good. We only care about mistakes here.
Yeah. So
everyone can Google you to hear about success. We just want to hear about mistakes. So what was the second mistake?
So when I went out to during this time I should say that I had a government grant, I had a commercialising emerging technology grant, I had a Yellow Pages business ideas grant, and then I got a Tomorrow IP grant. So there used to be grants in South Australia for new IP. So I got $100,000, which was a reasonable amount of money, and then I had to match funds. And I set out to find a developer, and I did do a search all over the world. So I had quotes from Vietnam and India and Malta, and then a chap that I knew here, he'd come to a couple of my media courses. He just turned up at an event, and I started talking to him, and he had always sounded very highly. He is a highly intelligent guy, real math brain. Anyway, without doing enough due diligence, I went with that. And it was supposed to be finished within a year. So now we're going 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So then I had to, guess what? Start again. Yeah.
What did you see was the hold up there? Like, what was taking these people so long?
They didn't know what to do. They had to set off on the wrong platform, and rather than throwing that out when it was coming to their attention, they kept persevering along the wrong technical path. That's
so they didn't have a pivot in their own code. There you go.
Bingo! Not a pivot. Okay, no. They just didn't. Yeah.
So how did you end up getting it off the ground?
So I did it actually during this whole time. Newsmaker was still alive and still
still that base,
and I had been attracting lots and lots of customers. I was doing a lot of manual work to get over the humps of technology, and so So then a developer friend of mine found a PHP guy up at Flagstaff Hill. Brilliant. Within 3 weeks, I completely rebuilt Newsmaker. Best platform I've ever had. I had made so many mistakes. I knew what I wanted and what I needed, and now it's fantastic. It's so much easier for users to use, and because of that, we got quite a lot of stickiness.
Awesome. So, what would you say was the difference between all of those bad developers and this one developer? Like, if you could put it down to a personal type of trait about them?
I think he's not up himself. There's one thing.
There's a lot of those developers out there. Yeah, you can say that. We swear all the time on this thing. It's fine.
But he's very, very down to earth. He's got 4 kids to feed. He's under the age of 30. He's hungry. He wants to do it, and he also gets to charge me every week. He sends me an invoice, and every week I pay it. And it is, he does everything he does really with the most practical approach possible. He always does it for you, not for him. He's not egocentric, and he's not trying to build Taj Mahal. He's just trying to do the job.
Yeah.
Those are the qualities, I think.
That's a good point, because that's what I find. Like, I have a developer background, and the people that I work with, we have people that are perfectionists when it comes to stuff, so we never ship. So I just wanted to see what it is that gets you to the point of finding the right developer that you need for your stage of the business.
I must say that there is a different thing, because we're now developing really new technologies that are right out there, and this developer is not the right one for that. You've got a different mindset when you're innovating from when you're actually doing.
Definitely. So let's go back before Newsmaker. What other sort of businesses have you done that have been totally bloated that you've just failed at?
Well, that's not enough for you.
We've still got half an hour left.
But after when you were away. Look, I've always had a fallback position, so when you say fail, I don't really think of things that way anyway, or what I've done wrong. I mean, I'm always doing things wrong on a daily basis.
I think if you're not, then you should be dead.
Yeah, that's right. The things that I've learned along the way, that, for instance, so we've gone from a person who's a journalist, and I was a writer and a journalist, and that's what I did, and I did that really well. But during that, I produced a lot of magazines, and when I went over, the reason I was attracted to the web is, the web's just a whole series of magazines. Not all of it, but there's a lot of it. It's just content, magazines, content. So I'm very, very familiar with that. And it's just completely native to me to create content, to organize content, to have deadlines where content has got to be developed. But I'm much, much happier on the side I'm on now, which is the technology side. And building something that's unique and something that can be basically sold on without me.
Yep.
And I think that's why most people would be here, who would want to do that and don't want to just work for an employer.
Who's working on a startup now?
Yeah, pretty well. A lot of people.
The ones that aren't, why not? I'll ask you that after.
think it's great to have a job early on and get the discipline of having a job and get those basic skills.
Yeah.
But later on, I mean, I cannot imagine ever
Working for someone else.
Although I do work for people because I have to work for clients.
I think, if you're your boss, you're always accountable.
And you have to be nice to everybody. That's good. That's not always easy.
You can get picky. It's just you end up running out of money. So you are more suited to the tech side now, but we didn't talk about any other mistakes or failures that you learned.
Well, I mean, it depends what the sort of the magazine field, in the sense that we always made just enough money from the advertising to keep the magazine going. It was actually backed by Julia Ross, who's not a massively wealthy HR person in Sydney. You probably don't even know who it is.
I'll Google it after.
Yeah, so she just pulled the plug on it. So it was successful in that we always paid everybody's wages every month. So we had about 7 staff.
So it wasn't your choice to stop it; it was someone else's.
Yeah.
Okay. Just thinking the next part.
I've done some research into that.
that's why I like it. I find that when I know too much about people on here, then I don't ask the right questions. So the less that I don't know about someone means that I get to enjoy the same conversation that everyone else gets as well. So I want to talk about, I know some people know it's a touchy thing, because Startup Spring last year, we had a panel of 4 people, and in that panel, all of them were guys, and I remember you putting your hand up. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. Yeah. So the thing about being not enough women in IT, but not just that, not enough women being given a voice in IT, or I think that because it is so, it's not just in IT, by the way, it's in business in general. I think women need to step up, and to some degree, it's not all men's fault that women aren't stepping up.
That's what I want to get to the question of, is that the hard part for like I do a bunch of different events and trying to get females that want to be in the position, even guys trying to get males to want to be in these type of positions. It's tough. So what I wanted to ask you is, do you think it's more that take away like the gender balance or the gender part of these events? Do you think it's just more people should be stepping up to get involved in community events?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that we all, I could probably get a couple of girls to step up right now and start talking. I just think that if there are 4 people on a panel answering, helping either mentoring or judging or whatever it is, at least one of them should be a woman, especially in the startup community, because what tends to happen in a lot of startups that I've seen is there's too much emphasis on the coding and not enough on the marketing. That's the biggest mistake that everyone makes, and they end up spending a lot of time and money getting their product right, and then they go, hold on.
I think for startups, the reason why that is, though, is a lot of people have this fear of failure, so they put emphasis on the product needs to be perfect, and it's their blanket that they never actually have to market.
It's their security blanket, and it's hard to sell, and it's hard to pick up the phone and talk to people you don't know and sell a product to them. But if anything, that's one of the biggest skills that we need.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So with Newsmaker, did you find that you tried to sell it before you made it?
I'm always selling it before I make it. I really didn't know how Newsmaker was going to go, and so when it was launched, I just phoned up a couple of PR people that I knew in Sydney and said, I've got this system, and said, I'll give it a go. It just started, and people started to spend money on it. In the first $55. Oh, $55, another $55, and then it grew, so it just kept going. And Newsmaker has grown organically through the Google News system, because Google News publishes Newsmaker stories. People who are searching for those stories find them, they come back to Newsmaker, they go, what's this? They sign up. So it's been steadily increasing, it still is. So we've got about 10,000 customers now.
So how much do you put into marketing on that? For the business itself?
I'm ashamed to say we spend about $300 a month on Google Ads. We do social media marketing, and it's webinars, the usual things that people do. But to be honest with you, it's nearly all organic and word of mouth.
Which is a good business model.
It's terrific.
So would you rather, do you think Google advertisements better than Facebook or Twitter?
And Facebook doesn't work for us
Does it?
at all. No, I've tried it. LinkedIn's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just comes down to your type of business. If you're targeting more companies, that's why Facebook.
Yeah, I think Facebook. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm on Facebook, I'm not looking for business information. It's personal.
Yep.
So I don't think if I was selling a consumer product, that would be different. I would definitely be using Facebook. But because it's B2B, LinkedIn's a lot better. And I also participate a lot in LinkedIn groups, and I run a LinkedIn group called Social Media Australia.
Yep.
So that brings me a lot of leads. I'm also the state president of the Public Relations Institute. That's no, it's just that it's the industry association for my industry.
Yep.
And that also means that I'm out there.
So it just comes down to networking.
Yeah, networking.
Okay. So for people that are going into PR, what sort of tips would you give them if they want to start their own PR company tomorrow?
I don't think you can do that. In a situation with PR, you have to have the experience. Starting a PR company when you don't have any experience is just, you die.
Okay, so who would be the first company that they should go to get the right type of experience?
That's going to be the thing. Who would I go? Lee McCloskey. But let's say Lee McCloskey.
Okay.
And after they leave there.
If they want to be a journalist?
Who would want to be a journalist? Anybody here want to be a journalist? No. Journalism has changed such a lot. I think everyone has to have writing skills now. So writing skills is one thing. Journalistic skills are brilliant. A journalist learns how to write very, very quickly about any topic and say it in as few words as possible, which is a massive skill to have.
Isn't that what Twitter sort of does?
Yeah, Twitter's forced people down that path, but obviously some people are better at it than others.
Yeah,
the other thing that's happened is the tone of voice that we use now is a lot different from the tone of voice that we used to use in journalism. So now you have to be a lot more relaxed in the way that you write.
Just give me an example.
An example would be, take a look at this story. Or I've been talking to Tony Abbott today, and this is what he said. This is in Twitter, of course. Yeah, and that would link through to a full story of whatever it was. But to go from my formal journalistic training to writing for Facebook and Twitter and so on is quite challenging. I have to really immerse myself in it and do a lot of reading of people who do it well. To change my tone of voice. But one of the biggest things that's happening in journalism now, have you heard of native advertising? Do you know what that is? No? Native advertising, brand journalism. It's basically sponsored content, but it's all this crap that you read in BuzzFeed and, the sort of, perfect cat pictures or cats in bikinis or something you just have to click on anyway. So clickbait, it's native advertising. So you're reading a normal story, and off to the side it will say more like this.
I've seen that in the middle of content.
Yeah, that's all like click-through content. Somebody gets paid every time you click on that.
Where do you see the news industry in 10 years?
I think there'll be a lot more of that. I hate to think of the quality getting lower and lower, or the fact that not many people are prepared to pay for really high quality journalism that's about opinions and so on. And the other thing that I've noticed is that people jump on bandwagons left and right without really considering the issues. It looks like an issue, they'll jump on it without actually knowing all the details. So it's a...
Do you think social media plays a lot in that way?
Yeah, I think social media is mainly positive, so I love it. I love social media.
We must have different friends.
I have to say that. But do I think that social media is both negative and positive? I think it's ruining a lot of relationships. Okay? And I think we should spend more time just talking to each other.
You know you have problems when you both Facebook chatting your ladies.
That's right. Well, yes. You want to ask anybody if they want to ask a question?
I think I'm getting to it. Is there any questions?
more of a comment. In my industry, I do event management. I don't see a lack of women in that kind of industry.
No. There's no lack of women around. What happens is that at the board level of companies, there is a lack of women. It's statistically true. And in the IT industry, obviously in the PR industry, there's stacks of women, but I can tell you that if you're in a bigger PR company, one of the multinationals, if you're a bloke, you'll be at the top. It's much easier. It happens all the time. Blokes get promoted over women quite frequently, even in a female-centric industry like PR. And in general, I'm very, very against quotas, board quotas to get more women in. I think it's really about women educating themselves and actually wanting to do it. That maybe women don't want to take risks, and there is a risk every time you stand up here or open your mouth. Actually, somebody is going to bring you down, and you just have to get used to it. Because they've been bringing blokes down for years too. Just blokes have got thicker skins, haven't they? What was that?
More egocentric.
Yeah, blokes just they just go, whatever. I could be wrong, but I'm happy to throw the floor open to that.
Has anyone found out, like if they step up and speak out, do you find you've been shut down, or is there just a fear of that?
I don't think so.
I think that women also, they do tend to be the nurturers, and it is just a fact of being a woman. But on the other side of the coin, we're missing out by not having the way that women think on boards and leading the country and so on.
Well, as in, I'm getting into this industry. I worked in Melbourne, and I did volunteering for a company called MTA, Music Theatre Australia.
Oh, yes.
The lady that runs that. It's embarrassing. But she's basically created like 3 or 4 businesses that are basically all by her and her husband, but mainly run by her. And that kind of stuff. I don't think she feels down in this.
No. And there are plenty of women out there doing their thing that's great. They're mainly in the arts and in non-profits, and less so on the technology side. But quite frankly, there's a lot of money in technology, and if women realise that, they might be in it more. And there's nothing in non-profits.
Well, my daughter about 4 years ago started and finished a computing degree at Adelaide here. She was the only female out of, I think there were about 56 in the maths computing part.
Oh, really?
That was it. She was the only female.
Is she working now?
In hospitality.
Why was that though? Do you find that was because of the types of jobs she was looking for in Adelaide? There was no work here for that?
Oh no, it was the... I mean, she went for it is true, I've got a background in teaching, and the universities are doing a lot to try and get girls into the not so much the engineering, but definitely the IT and the maths type of courses, because the intake is extremely such a low percentage.
It's funny, I don't know if this is true or not, so you can correct me, but I don't think you necessarily have to be a maths genius to be a coder for a start.
No.
I think what you need is logic and creativity.
Well, that's what she said. She'd never done she hadn't even done computing at school, but she had set up this database as her first major assignment. She just looked at one, I can do that. It's logical.
It's really not that, it's not rocket science, the code. It's just, it looks intimidating at the start.
I'll just comment on from my personal experience I didn't finish math at school. I quit when I was in year 9, and now I'm coding for the government, and I even had to learn BODMAS last semester, which is embarrassing to say that, but that's how much math I didn't know, and it's crazy to think that. And I went into IT to challenge myself, because I was always sort of good at English and reading, and I love reading. I still do, and all of those sorts of things. But then I wanted more of a challenge. I was like, I'll go into tech, but even bringing up what people were saying before about not many women in the industry, and how I was saying to you before about the girls who I met last week, and they're saying they're intimidated by how many men are in IT, and there's just not enough women, and then they think, oh, well, that's not an industry for women. They're like, I shouldn't go into that industry because that's not.
How do we change that though?
I think it's a great opportunity for conversation because women do communicate the IT better than the men. You know, you try and talk to a coder and you just get so frustrated. It's like, come on, keep it simple. We want to get that message out there. So I think if you're going to do both, it's
no, definitely.
Awesome.
And I mean, I think it's not like a lot of the reason why I think I was hired as a coder was not for my coding ability. It's for my business ability and my communication ability and being able to work on projects. And I'm definitely not the best coder at uni by any means. But if you're bringing it into like the whole thing, and that's what I was trying to say. Like when I was talking to girls last week about getting into the like tech space and stuff, and they were interested because I was there, and that was a choice for them to be there at this event. And when they were sort of asking me things, I was like, you don't have to be the best at this. You have to bring all these things together, bring all your knowledge together, and just.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things, this new business that I'm starting, that I've been a bit cautious about mentioning, the biggest thing you can bring to the table is logic. So if you've got logic and you've got a framework, you can build almost anything. And I think there's always, you always need some coding, but the way that the world is going is towards frameworks. Just the way that we went with WordPress and other. Is that right?
WordPress is like before you used to have to build a CMS to get a WordPress type of thing. Now you just download WordPress and you're ready.
Yeah, well, that's going to be the same for other aspects of coding as well, not just CMSs. Yes.
Everything's really built on top of frameworks.
Yes.
It's going back from the old way of coding. Like Windows coding used to have a thing called like an IDE where you drag and drop, and then that painted your window, and then you did the code as well.
Yeah.
And then we went to web where we didn't have any of that sort of stuff. And now we get back to that point again now where anyone can really make an app or make a website without having to know how to code that well. I think that's the good point is if you were saying your developers put pains in the arse, that's that's what to explain. That's what to extend on the development part of not having to be the best coder.
Yeah.
Because I meet a lot of coders, and a lot of them don't really know anything except for I can talk really fast, or I can talk about really intelligent shit, but they can't do anything else, and that's what
it's bringing everything together in one package.
Back to Newsmaker, which is the site you developed. Yes. You might have already answered this, so apologies if you did. How did you fund the development?
Well, it's really interesting because, as I said, it started at a bar in Silicon Valley, and my business partner at the time said, "We'll never get a comic grant, a government grant. We'll never get this without you. So we're just going to fund it slowly ourselves." But actually, it was basically funded mainly from a comic grant.
What grant?
Commercializing emerging technologies grant. That grant system is gone way off the but it's been replaced by what's it been replaced by?
Well, it was replaced by a few things, but the next version will be the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program.
Yes. And do we know anything about that? Do we know? These two guys work for that, by the way.
There's a component called Commercialising New Ideas.
Yeah.
And we'll find out what that means soon.
Right. I believe it's going to be a lot less money. There's not going to be the big $1 million funds. It's more along the lines of the 250k. But 250k can go a long way from your bootstrapping. It's not bad at all. The idea that you do matching funds, I think, is not such a bad thing. One of the great things about government money is it doesn't involve equity. So whatever you get is worth a lot more than something you get involves giving away equity. However, you didn't ask me. Actually, here's a great error that I made. It's the best. It's the best. In the early days of the News Gallery, which was producing Newsmaker, I was approached by, might as well even say his name, Uncle Guy. And he, I met him down at the, what's that called again? The Angel Investors Conference down at Glenelg. And he asked me all these really, very hard-hitting questions about my business, and I managed to answer them. And he gave me a term sheet for $250,000, by the way. And I didn't accept it because it was for a lot of the company. It was more than I thought I should give away at that point. And that is an absolute classic stupid money thing to do. I should have just taken that money, taken all Dom's contacts, his incredible network, and gone for it. But I didn't. I'm still really friends with him, and he still uses Newsmaker, so it's always not lost. But that was a big mistake. I think a lot of us do that.
How much equity did he ask for?
What should I tell you? Well, he started at 40, and then when I arced up, he brought it down to 30, and I should have taken. Yeah, I would have sold the company by now. Yeah, definitely. So that's is an error. The only good thing about not selling it is that I have a lot of leads for my next business because I've got a very, very good loyal customer base. But don't do that.
When you usually start a business, what do you usually your endings? Where do you usually go into it? Do you think, I should keep on going on this until I finish it, or do you plan on?
I never think like that. I'm always starting something new. So the next great thing, it really is the next great thing, is going to be a game changer. I've got to use all these words, by the way. No, it is. I think that I'm always thinking about what is the next thing that I can provide
So you always
for
say
them.
you're going to finish it, like instead of you're going to sell it off.
I'd like to. I will sell it. Yes, I will sell. Whatever business I'm in, it's being built for sale. It's not being built.
Starting with the end in mind.
Yes, yeah. And with the next business, I've got a much clearer idea because of my experience now of how to make that happen and how you really do have to focus on that end game and the kind of company that will buy you out, and then build your company in that direction. But the most important thing is to have customers. Yeah. And yeah.
So what's giving you, you talked about startups, what's giving you the most satisfaction, or the one where you've gone, that's...
I think when you get media coverage, it's really great, I have to say. And being in the media game, getting a front page, huge photograph of myself with Geek Goddess on it, that was pretty satisfying. I was wearing red too, yeah. I think, to be honest with you, when you go up to 5,000 customers, 6,000 customers, 7,000 customers, I mean, honestly, that is the best thing. I'm much more number-oriented than I used to be. I will go in and check the numbers regularly. We've gone from, when I went off and spent all that money, a huge amount of money going down the wrong path with the wrong developer, I nearly killed Newsmaker in the process. So when I came back to it, about 18 months ago, it took me a while to get back. Now we're ahead of where we were before we nearly collapsed, right, under the weight of the debt and so on. So now that's really satisfying to know that the brand was strong enough, that the offering is strong enough, and that people really love it. It's great. Get so many. The complaints I got in the interim were just horrific. I hated lifting up the phone. Now it's all compliments and great service, and it's very satisfying.
Do you think you need those phone calls at the start there?
Yeah, I think that thing. A complaint is a gift. You've always got to be nice to people who complain.
When you started out, were you initially employed, and did you do a transition period between?
No. Newsmaker, I founded Newsmaker. I co-founded Newsmaker with a developer in Tasmania, and we're still mates. But I bought him out after about a year because we had different ideas. He wanted to produce a free service, sending out press releases for free to journalists, and I said that would just kill us stone dead, which I would have done. So we went our separate ways.
And quit your job, and then
He was asking, did you have a job?
No, I've always been, what happened was I went from being a journalist, and so I'm working full-time as a journalist and I'm freelancing as a journalist at the same time. Then I had children, and then I worked as a journalist freelance, and I freelanced as a PR person, so I learned PR skills. Then when I came to Adelaide, I was working for the Australian IT section and freelancing as a PR person. then I founded a PR agency, so my own agency, and I went from that to being headhunted for. There was a company called Mnet, a mobile development company. So in the early stages of Mnet, I worked there, and that meant that I got introduced to a whole bunch of influential investors and people as well from all the big telcos. And then I went to Foursticks with Alan Noble and Dave Bond, and their whole Foursticks did fail. Although it was later sold for about quite a few million actually. But their whole philosophy was to build a global brand in Adelaide, and it was extremely inspiring to work with them and to really open my eyes. It also opened my eyes to how to run a country and how even with the best people on board you can still fail. They grew far too quickly, and they never really got the customers in at that early stage. So anyway, what you were asking, did I go from a job to running my own business? So I was doing that, and as that company started to show signs of creaking, so I started to look for another opportunity, and that's when I leapt into. But I'll never be without a job because I freelance. I can always freelance. But so going, in answer to your question, I didn't go from a job per se. I went from a freelance situation into a startup.
Given that there's been a lot of startup activity in the last 2 or 3 years in Adelaide, I'd be interested in your view on what you think the startup ecosystem still needs.
Ecosystem. That's another one. Thank you. What the ecosystem still needs.
You have to pivot.
I think it's real. I've been pivoting all my days. What does it need? It needs. I think we've got an incredibly cool set of people here, intelligent, everything going for us in Adelaide. I think we lack confidence, and I think that even though, and I'm talking to politicians as well, I don't think they get it. I don't think they get it at all. I don't think our politicians actually get the difference that a strong tech startup community can make to Adelaide. There is really no excuse for us not being known worldwide for innovation. And we have done extremely well. Things like Embertech, for instance, from Pledge Capital, which was, Embertech is the energy-saving power supply, is that right? Have I got that right? Yeah, and that's in Adelaide. They have made a shitload of money, including money for the government, and yet they closed down Pledge Capital. Often there's a knee-jerk reaction when governments change, for instance, or somebody doesn't like someone. There seems to be a personality game as well. Sorry, I've digressed. You're right. Yes. What can you do to change things? I think it would be great if we really just kept going and kept more confidence that we actually can do it. One of the biggest things that we do wrong, though, is the lack of marketing. People just fuddle about with marketing. We need more marketing training for IT companies, for tech startups. And we're always reinventing the wheel, and every company is trying to put their very meager resources into the same activities. There must be some way of having a hub for that happening.
Leila, you mentioned that it took a few years before you found someone who was the right person to do the job and build the system you're after. Now, during these years, besides getting very frustrated, what were you trying to do? Were you trying to sell your vision? Was something that wasn't built yet?
Yeah, I've always tried to sell the vision, and I think that when you've got to be real. Yeah, exactly. How did that work? Well, I've been told, if you're being told by the developer that he's going to have something ready by the end of next week, and you believe him, you go out and sell what he's going to have ready at the end of next week, and then he doesn't produce it, then you go, okay, I'm going to have to. And the customer's saying, where is this great thing that you're going to offer me? It's extremely debilitating to go on. And even despite the fact that I did sit down and have strong words, I was in a situation where basically it was being developed offshore as well. So it was a very tricky situation. All I can say is that because of my workaholic nature, I was holding the thing up by keeping Newsmaker going in the background to finance the whole operation. Yeah, I could have done without that, to be honest.
So how did you keep mentally healthy? You know, like even though
Mentally healthy, I was not mentally healthy.
yeah, it's called some people mind going to get me wine actually. So anyone want to get me a glass? Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about, in regards to marketing, whilst protecting IP, how do you sort of...
Well, you can't, if you're in the midst of protecting your IP because of a patent, you can't market the system, full stop. And I'm in that situation now, where I've got to wait. You can say some things, obviously, but the biggest, another part of the advice, which I think Doug or Grant or anyone will give you who's been around in this industry for a while, you've got to surround yourself by the best people that you can possibly find, and the most trustworthy people, and there are a lot of sharks out there. If someone thinks that you've got something they can benefit from, they're going to be onto it. You've got to really do your due diligence on people. Cheers, Dusty. Thanks. Yeah.
Do you find that in Adelaide?
What?
That there's a lot of sharks that are just out to
I don't think it's just in Adelaide. Yeah, I think everywhere.
Because we go around preaching to every new person that wants to get into a startup, where they want you to sign NDAs and all this sort of stuff. And like, if you're in a startup, always be selling. So I think like that advice of like being protective and putting yourself around trustworthy people, because there's a lot of sharks out there, is counteractive to the...
There's a big difference between always be selling and protect your IP. I think I'm always selling. Am I not? No. I think that I think it depends on the technology. Some technologies really do need to be protected, and it's a big mistake to let them go too soon. But it doesn't take that much to get a patent pending. Yeah, so then you can just shout it on the rooftops.
Alright, any more questions?
Yeah.
When you were having the developers you couldn't market your product from your screen and things like that. When you're having the software developed, you couldn't market it from screen dumps and things like that. You actually needed to provide the product for them.
No, I did market it from screen dumps.
Okay, and
that was the issue. I didn't get in the actual product didn't come through.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
So they expected on that day. Okay.
Yeah. So then I had to. So having persuaded all my customers away from Newsmaker, I had to tell them, well, actually, that great thing I told you about, it's gone. We're folding it back into Newsmaker. And to be honest with you, that thing about fail fast is the best thing. You just have to shoot it in the head and get on with it and pick yourself up. And I think I said to Doug earlier that the only real regret I have in all of this is that I didn't start 10 years earlier. I wish that I had realised that I could start a technology company, and now, well, I mean the future's looking pretty bright right now, actually, but it's taken a long time. And I've been a single parent through this whole thing too, so bringing up 2 kids as well. I would like to hear their opinions of what went on.
What do you think inhibited you? Like through that time, you say you wasted a lot of time and didn't get it done as soon as you could. What inhibited you from starting it early?
One is that I actually didn't realise that somebody who couldn't code could start a technology company. That fundamental thing. I've been working for technology companies and writing about technology companies for years and years. And I didn't realise that if I had an idea, I could have someone else develop it and it would still be my idea. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds stupid, but that's what I thought. And if only I'd known. Because I've had plenty of ideas.
It's a good way to get partners and co-workers and all that kind of stuff without spreading your idea out to everybody and kind of flopping shoulder cards.
I think you've got to talk to people that you trust, is that thing that we're talking about. And so you can talk to me. I know a lot of people, and if I know someone that fits with your, it's got to be someone who fits with your culture, you know. So there's got to be a cultural fit in everything that you do. You can talk to guys like Grant and Daga, I have to say that, sort of. Really, they know everybody around town and they know the people that can be trusted. Stuart, there's in hiding. Stuart is incredibly good value if you want to just have a chat with him. You really do need to get out and talk to some of the folks, the older people in the industry who have been there. Because a lot of the younger ones, they're fantastic and incredibly intelligent and so on, but they are still got stars in their eyes. They haven't.
They've got no scars yet.
yeah. There is a lot to be said for going to Silicon Valley and just walking around and talking to people there as well. And I'm not saying I'm recommending that, but Boston is a great place to go if you want to get a feel for a completely different startup community that's backed more from an academic point of view. And I will give it Boulder, Colorado as well. So I don't know if you can get yourself over there. But when you go there, you realise that Adelaide has all the elements that should work right here. But we do need to talk to more people who've been there and done that on a global basis, and that's a tricky thing.
With South Australian manufacturing dwindling exponentially each year, do you see the startup community as a viable future economic fuel for South Australia?
There's a yes or no to that. I think the startup community is way too small and not generating enough revenue to even approach replacing. We need some massive success stories to get anywhere near where the car industry has been. I think there's a lot of smart manufacturing going on, so it's not lost. And there's a lot of politicking around the whole thing. I think that we've got much more chance of replacing the car industry with clean energy. I think the clean energy sector. Now, I don't know how that's going there because I haven't been. Doug, you're hiding there. What do you think about the clean energy sector?
I have no view on that.
You have no view. You have no view on that. I don't believe that for 1 second. But anyway, I would say that I think we need to keep on persevering with the startup industry and the tech industry. I mean, come on, it would only take one, $1 billion sale to Google to make it, and for people to stay in Adelaide. It's getting the money back to South Australia that's the tricky bit. There's plenty of companies that have started here and gone away. It's staying here. So Clipsal is an example of a local brand that stayed here and then sold to Schneider Electric later on. But Hills Industries is probably our biggest. Hills Industries. I'm looking at you now because Hills Industries is investing in startups. And they are a massive success story. And Hills Industries is pure South Australian, isn't it? No, it's not. It was. Yeah, it was. So, in terms of when you're talking economically, the contribution of the startup community to the South Australian economy would be relatively small, but its potential would be large.
You have much experience. You mentioned earlier on about angel investors.
Yes, I've spoken to many angel investors, and I'm also I actually tried to for the business that went down the tubes. I had applied to Innovation Bay in Sydney, and so you have to do a 5-minute video. Which is just excruciatingly painful for me to create a video. I couldn't stand it. But that's another skill you need, by the way. You need to have the skill of making videos of all sorts.
Get somebody else to do it.
Yeah, but you often have to be yourself doing it. And people, investors buy you, they don't buy somebody else. Yeah. So, but we only took 4 companies through to the Innovation Bay dinner, and I was the 5th company out of, and the one that I did there were 31 applicants, and that had been unprecedented. Before that, they'd only had 8 or 9, so I had a really good chance. Anyway, so I didn't get to present to that angel investor community. Again, if you want to ask me something about that offline, I will tell you who to go with. But Stuart is. Are you involved with the angel investment community? No.
Well, I do my own.
You do your own, yeah. So, again, it's fraught. And with angel investors in particular, you need to make sure that they're on the same page as you culturally, that they understand. One of the worst things you can do with any investor is tell them you're going to achieve something and not achieve it. So you're better to be extremely realistic about whatever you're claiming that you can do.
We might wrap it up, and then you're going to hang around for a bit.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any more questions, as long as she has a drink in her hand, she's cool.
Health matters.
And what does success mean to you as well?
What does success mean to me? That's an interesting question, because up until this year, I don't know if I felt that I was successful, but this year I feel that I've got a little bit of work-life balance going, and I feel that coming from where I come from, so a working-class Scottish family, to where I am now, and just feeling quite comfortable in my skin. I mean, to me, success is feeling comfortable in your skin more than anything else, more than money or anything else. And my relationships with people make me successful. So, and financially, I feel fine. But I don't think that money is everything at all. Hope that answers.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. You give them a big clap.